that we don't actually have to tar and feather pollsters.
The unfortunate reflection of a poor understanding of math. And it's actually interesting. It's good cocktail chatter. I believe I said it's but
$256 million was spent by the Biden-Harris administration on disinformation.
Welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures, the show you never knew you needed and still don't want anyways. I'm Christopher Alexander, your blockchain and advocacy communications expert.
And I'm Justin Wallin, your guide through the often murky world of politics and polling.
Every week, we dive into the intersection of crypto, policy, and politics without taking sides. We're here to give you the straight, data-driven analysis that influences the decisions of those who want to win or want to be elected.
Think of it as a late 80s newscast, but with a twist. We bring you the serious stuff, but with a dash of sardonic wit and just a hint of irreverence.
So whether you're a crypto enthusiast, a policy wonk, or just someone who appreciates a data-driven approach, this is your place.
We bring you both sides, weigh the impact on crypto, and then we share what we use for show prep every week on our medium.
So remember, no one is as smart as someone who agrees with you, and now get ready to enter the no swamp zone.
Welcome to the Crypto Swamp Creatures. This is going to be a great segment. This is one of my favorites. This is where I have sent Justin Wallin an article. We will not post a link to this one and say, hey, what do you think of this? And he becomes like angry. Not unreasonably angry, but highly agitated at the minimum. So I found an article, and this was not from like a super right-wing outlet. I don't think it was. I think actually it was kind of a center outlet, but it said, why were all the left-leaning pollsters wrong? And Justin, if you could start by telling me, if you recall exactly what you said to that question, I think it would perfectly sum up with this little segment here.
Well, I believe I said it's bullshit, but I may have used stronger language, but
well. I believe you said they were idiots because the math.
Well, I continued on. That's true. Yeah, there was the initial thing. Yeah, it was an idiotic article, and it's an unfortunate reflection of a poor understanding of math.
So, having said that, are polls wrong, evil, and should all pollsters be excluded from polite society? I was going to say something else, but I think the algorithm will ban us. It was kind of like what happened to Mussolini at the end of his life. That's what I Well, so Justin, and I'm sure this is not, this isn't sarcastic. This is not your rational self-interest speaking. Let's talk about why that article was ridiculous, and when you listen to pollsters, and why thinking pollsters predict the future is the dumbest idea ever.
Yeah. So first off, in the world of polling, just like in the world of anything, we are on a platform, DYOR, right? Do your own research. And I love the mantra because it applies to everything else. So numbers are funny. And I know it's harsh to say it was an idiotic article, but when you write about something, you probably should do the merest amount of research about the underlying principles of which you're writing. And the math underlying.
I do want to add, I believe that it was called journalism.
Yes.
And that was once practiced in the United States.
Yeah, it probably took longer than an hour to write an article, which this clearly did not. So,
well, in the author's defense, the AI did a great job.
That's right. Yeah. So let's lay this out for everybody. And I don't want to throw the it's easy to find, but my intent is not to damage the author or the publication, but we see this a lot. And it's a problem, and it only takes a moment to make a more compelling article and more thoughtful analysis. And what they say is, well, in this case, there appeared to be trends, whereas liberal, what they perceived as liberal or progressive or democratic-leaning public polling outlets, which is different than private polling, let's save that for a separate segment, public polling outlets seem to indicate a trend wherein Harris had a lead. And conservative or Republican apparently leaning, what they defined as leaning outlets, and some of that makes sense in terms of their application, seem to have a Republican leaning trend. Let's describe what that trend is really quickly. On either side, it's about 2 points. And then the article even goes so far as to say, less than a point. So they're comparing this trend, which seems to show, 2 points above, 1 point above, somewhere in that neighborhood, an outlier here and there. In the case of Seltzer's poll, 3.8%, leaning towards Harris. And then the Republican ones, 2%, 1%, so forth. And it's true that you see a lot of lines at that level, right? So they found a pattern. That's true. The problem with it is their conclusions are meaningless. The pattern means nothing. All those items are within the margin of error. There's a statistical margin of error, which has nothing to do with methodological margin of error, right? Those we can talk about in a separate thing. And it's actually interesting. It's good cocktail chatter. The statistical margin of error on all of these items is somewhere below 4%. It's 4%, it's 3%, somewhere between those two. When you're looking at polls and you see someone's up 2%, they're not up. They're mathematically up, but they're not statistically up. It is tied. And we see this time and time and time again by people who should know better. It's done on the networks. It's done by the talking heads. It's done by editors. It's done by, unfortunately, the Seltzer poll, while an outlier, her one big mistake, and she's a human being. She's incredibly respected. I have tremendous respect for Ann Seltzer. And she's been right more often than she's been wrong. She made the mistake of saying, there's a clear lead here, this 3.8% lead in behalf of Harris in her state, and it just wasn't true. It was within the margin of error. So it was a misstatement by her. But the point is, what this article does is it identifies trends that mean nothing, and that is one of those things that you constantly need to look at when you're talking about numbers. It is very easy to look at something and say, I see a pattern. Fine, you saw a pattern. Good for you. What does it mean? Because that's where you're very likely to be wrong if you don't do just a little tiny bit of research and figure out what it is you're looking at.
So no one was wildly out of the margin of error. And so the idea that there was this massive mistake made is just, the data doesn't support it.
It doesn't support it. And let's look at the popular vote. I mean, they're within a point of each other. Right, so that popular vote continues to shrink as votes are counted. He still won a mandate in the Electoral College, but polls measure the popular vote. That's what they're capable of measuring, and the popular vote is very, very, very close within a point. By
the way, I do hope the Democrats get over their election denialism in Pennsylvania, and I'm a little concerned about the misinformation and disinformation they're spreading. For example, there's a new theory that Elon Musk rigged the election, and maybe the Trump administration needs to collude with all the social media entities to stop this, because that was acceptable 4 years ago. But I'm being sarcastic. They shouldn't do that. But that is exactly
both sides do it. It is the least respectable aspect of politicking. Let's go.
Yeah, and I did love how you had like 8 years of clips of people saying George Bush wasn't legitimately elected that you could juxtapose to people saying how dare Donald Trump say the election was rigged, which I thought was great. But now the shocker. Well, actually, we don't need to have parties involved. The losing side is now saying the election is rigged, which is how it works. Except in Baltimore.
It's not a large theme, right? It is true that we're seeing a little microcosm, but aren't you happy that nationally we're not seeing that on a broad scale? I think that's really good for the health of the nation. I hope both sides.
It is.
Largely.
It is, and those wackos are just often they're like the other side's wackos are wackos. However, I did see an interesting article. I don't know if you caught this. $256 million was spent by the Biden-Harris administration on disinformation. The majority of that went to academic institutions to study it.
I did not see that. That.
Now, that being a little bit of my own line of work, I can tell you that is a staggering sum of money. The biggest contract that ever came out of SOCOM on the war on terror for any kind of counter disinformation or anything was $400 million, and they spent very, very little of it.
Yeah,
so,
and let's keep in mind, like the total spend was a 1.5 billion. So, so that's a significant percentage of a campaign spend.
Oh, no, so just to be clear, this was the federal government contracting out $256 million.
Wow. Okay, that is I completely misunderstood that. That's massive.
No. So my point is the biggest contract I know of was 400 million in this space.
Wow.
And that was 10 years ago. And they did 256 million, over $250 million to study this alleged problem, which was that a bunch of people disagreed with them. And occasionally we're right and occasionally we're wrong, which, again, from my own line of work is a little scary. But we can delve deep into censorship conspiracies later. So I think we've established, Justin, that we don't actually have to tar and feather pollsters, hang them in effigy or any other sort of medieval tactics that have been proposed on both sides.
There were a few outliers here and there, some misstatements here and there, but let's face it, it's for anyone to project within 3% any aspect of their personal or professional life. Try that. See how well you do it over time.
Wait, you mean Polymarket doesn't work? By the way, if you want to be an intern on the Crypto Swamp Creatures, and we will write you the most glowing, fake, tributary, whatever you need to get into whatever school you want. If you want to come work on whether Polymarket actually predicts anything or not accurately, we won't pay you, but we'll give you a lot.
That's right. You will be well appreciated.
So join us on our Polymarket crusade because we're too lazy to do it ourselves. But we're excited if you'll do it.
And that's all for this week on the Crypto Swamp Creatures.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of crypto, politics, and policy.
Remember, the data doesn't lie, and neither do we. Well, not about anything important anyways.
Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay out of the swamp.